Good afternoon, everyone. This is David Kearns with Haley Marketing, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. Today is our treat to share with you the feedback, our observations, lessons learned from the 2017 Staffing Industry Analysts Executive Forum. This year, I was there along with Brad Smith and Ryan Marr from Haley Marketing Group, and as usual, it was a fantastic event. As usual, way too much to take in than we'll be able to cover in this brief hour, but we'll do our best to share some of what we saw, we learned, we observed. Feel free to ask questions, and if you haven't already made your plans to be in Miami Beach next March for next year's Executive Forum, make sure you do so. So with that said, we're going to jump right in because the Executive Forum recap is one of those webinars that always takes us a long time to get through because there's so much content to talk about. So very quickly, the agenda for today is to review the 4 keynote sessions that we were able to attend, go through a handful of the breakouts, the ones that kind of stuck in our minds. We'll talk about a few lessons that we learned, and then of course we'll be available for Q&A. If you're shy about using the GoToWebinar Q&A, feel free to reach out to our social media team through the hashtag #LunchWithHaley, and they'll be happy to get questions to us as well. With that said, let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into the keynotes. And for those of you who have been to the Executive Forum before, you know that the first presentation is always from Barry ASIN, who is the president of Staffing Industry Analysts, and it's sort of his annual review of what's going on in the staffing industry and his always unique insights as to what the future will hold for our companies. So the theme for this year's conference was Dare to Lead, and you're going to see every single keynote was around the theme of leadership. I don't know if Barry thought that there's a real leadership gap in the industry, or maybe now just with what's going on in the world, it's really a time for all of us to become more effective leaders of our organizations and in our local communities and in the staffing industry. So the first part of the presentation was called Leadership from the Outside, and there were a few main points that he made. Number one is that there are changing perceptions amongst the stakeholders in the world of staffing. Some of those perceptions are extremely positive for our industry, the biggest of which is more of an embrace of flexible work amongst workers. So that doesn't just mean temporary help, that includes freelance workers, gig economy workers, independent contractors, and temporary employees. Currently, 44 million Americans are doing some sort of gig or freelance work. That's $792 billion a year in revenue, way bigger than the staffing industry by itself, and it includes that traditional temp help, all the cloud workers, all the independent contractors. And what Barry said is that the drive towards gig work from an employee's perspective is driven by uncertainty. So they're not sure what their future holds in corporate America. They're not sure if they're going to have their job tomorrow. They're not sure what their benefits are going to look like. And they want more control. They want more income. So they're looking to supplement, in many cases, what they're doing for a regular 9-to-5 job. And in other cases, they're looking to make this flexible work their primary source of income. As I mentioned, it's really being driven by global uncertainty. Clearly what's been going on in the U.S. with the last election season, with our new administration, with our foreign policy, we're in a state of turmoil, flux, call it what you will, but it's leading to uncertainty, not just in America, but all around the world. And that uncertainty, while it's really not good for most business growth, it's actually very good for the staffing industry, because the more our clients can't look at the future with a lot of predictability, the more they're going to need flexible sources of labor. So global uncertainty has actually been really good for our industry, although we're at such a level right now, we're sort of in uncharted territory in terms of what will it mean next. And could be very good for the U.S. economy, could prove to be very bad depending on our trading policies, depending on world currencies, interest rates rising. There's just so many unknowns that we can't predict very accurately what's going to happen in our clients' businesses or in our own, but right now we have to do as much as we can to take advantage of helping our clients and helping employees to create more stability in their lives through the use of staffing services and by working with a staffing company as their career partner. And the last bit of very good news is the contingent workforce is growing, and pretty dramatically. Employers in 2009 were asked what percentage of their workforce is contingent, and at that time it was about 12%. Last year in 2016, that had increased to 22% of the workforce being contingent, almost doubling where it was 7 years ago. And 10 years from now, staffing industry analysts is forecasting it will be 29%. Nearly a third of all workers will be contingent. So for those of us in staffing, that's phenomenal. It means we've got a period of continued growth, but there's going to be continued challenges as we figure out how to adapt to new business models and changing demographics and changing economics throughout the world. Short term, the result is what you see on screen. Nothing that's a surprise to anyone here. Talent shortages and recruiting are the top challenges for the industry. We didn't run into anybody at the executive forum who said, my problem is getting business. No, everybody was, it's attracting talent, it's retaining talent, and in many cases, it's actually using the talent that's already been recruited, making better use of the candidates that are in their ATSs. Barry's presentation talked about not just what's going on today, but what's coming in the future and the challenges that our industry is going to have to deal with over the next 10 years. So while demand for flexible work is going to increase, these are the big challenges that he pointed out. First is AI and robotics, and it's been all over the news. I personally follow a bunch of AI people on Facebook because they share all kinds of interesting things. But according to research that Barry shared, about 60% of occupations, and 60% of occupations, about 1/3 of the tasks can be automated. Only about 5% are fully automatable, but it's going to change how work gets done. He gave an example of True Blue, and because of the robotics put in place at Amazon, they saw a 53% decline in the use of temporary labor at Amazon. It's a pretty astonishing statistic, so that robots were replacing more than half the human workers. Amazon has added 45,000 robots to their warehouses, which is up 50% from where it was in 2015. So how is AI and robotics going to impact staffing? Clearly, there's going to be a change in how a lot of work gets done in manufacturing, in distribution, but also in knowledge work. There was other sessions on AI where they talked about how some of the easiest tasks to automate are things that are typically white-collar jobs, but they're process-driven, and those processes can be learned by computers and repeated. So everything from accounting to creative services. I think the robots have the biggest challenge on only jobs that require human interaction, and everything else can be automated. So that means where we provide staff is going to change, and how we help people who may have been displaced find jobs is going to change. The next point that Barry made was that big data is changing the hiring process. And so companies, our clients, are looking for us to make better hiring decisions using data to analyze who's going to be the best fit, where to find talent, whether that we're finding that data through Google, through social media, through other sources of business intelligence. Our clients want us to become better at providing insight and not just people. We have to tell them how to hire better, how to manage people better, how to retain their workers better. And we have to use data-driven metrics to prove that the advice we're giving is accurate. If we're just about filling job orders, we are commoditizing the value we're able to provide. So we have to find ways to use that information to provide more advantage to our clients. We have to be more consultative. That sort of ties right into the next point about managing complexity and competition. I didn't put the chart in this year's Executive Forum recap. I had it in one from last year, which showed the entire ecosystem of the staffing industry, and it's exploded with all kinds of different companies providing services that are related to talent management. There are literally dozens of categories. Our question is, as a traditional staffing company, is where do we play? How do we compete? Do we grow into some of these new areas like RPO, or trying to provide managed services, or bringing in VMS technology, or doing online staffing in the gig economy world? Do we play in those areas? Do we not play? Do we partner with those organizations? How do we partner with those organizations? Running a staffing business has never been more difficult. And then throw on top of that the myriad of new regulations that we're being forced to deal with in managing people. And right now, as you see in the last bullet here, the Trump factor, dealing with the uncertainty. What's going to happen to those regulations? We don't know what's going to happen with affordable care. There's a vote coming up. We don't know what's going to happen in a lot of the states that have some very unfriendly regulations towards the staffing industry pending. California, which has a bill pending that would ban employers from offering additional hours to anybody outside their organization if they have part-timers who aren't yet working full-time. It's clearly an anti-staffing bill, but it looks like it's going to pass. The next issue is globalization. The growth in what SIA thought would be a big trend towards total workforce management and companies managing their workforces centrally from throughout the entire world hasn't really happened. And that's probably good for most of us on today's calls, because it means those big international companies that thought they could take over the world in staffing don't have as much of an advantage, and still the local ground game is what matters the most. So every year SIA talks about the impact of globalization. This is the first year they said it's really not happening as fast as we thought, and the independent player provides great service, still can do very well. But be aware, there's going to be more demand to bring in resources that may be less expensive, particularly if you do knowledge work, from anywhere around the world, and to provide new kinds of solutions than we had done in the past. And the last one was the Trump factor, as I mentioned. Short term, we've seen a lot of business confidence. Lower taxes and regulations are what people are hoping for. It's been, generally speaking, good for Wall Street, except for the last week. That would be very good, lower taxes and less regulation, because it would drive domestic growth. Some of the protectionism and desire to drive U.S. manufacturing would be good for us. Something that improves ACA would be good for us. And the fact that the overtime legislation that was narrowly defeated in December is probably not going to come back and haunt us this year. But if you're in IT staffing, the issues with H-1B visas is going to make it harder to find people, and protectionism just long-term is not going to be good for business. So like the uncertainty I mentioned at the beginning, the whole Trump factor is something we just don't know, but in staffing, it means we just have to keep one eye on the news and the other eye on our clients' businesses and say, how can we help you adapt more quickly than you can doing things on your own without our staffing services? In terms of what they're predicting for this year, slower growth overall. Last year it was 6%. This year they're forecasting 4%. The big winner is in education with 12% growth. Healthcare, IT, accounting, and finance are at 6%. Clinical and scientific are at 5%. Industrial only at 3%. Engineering and legal only at 1%. And sorry for our folks in office, actually forecasted to decline this year. So if you're a clerical staffing company and the industry is scheduled to go down, well, you don't want to sink when everybody else goes down. You really now have to think about, how do I get more aggressive about marketing? How do I get more aggressive about selling? How do I get more aggressive about recruiting to fill every job opening that I have? How do I provide more value to my clients? Maybe I expand into other skill disciplines. You're really going to have to think strategically about how to be a more valued partner to your clients, or you're facing a decrease in sales if you're just keeping up with the market, and nobody wants to see that. And finally, Barry talked about leadership from the inside of the organization, and 5 disciplines that every staffing company needs to have to drive their success in 2017. Number 1 is enhancing strategic alignment, making sure there's alignment between the owner, the senior leaders, the branch and regional managers, and the recruiters and salespeople who are out on the streets, that they all understand what the organization is trying to achieve, the value you're delivering to your clients. It's really important to reinforce cultural standards. Have a brand that means something, so that you're going to add more value to clients who appreciate and value your brand and your culture. Do things to strengthen your internal talent, whether that's through training, through hiring, but you want to make sure that you are building the strongest recruiting team and the most consultative sales team that you can. You're going to look for ways to drive team performance, getting better at metrics, just like I mentioned earlier about big data. How do we get better at measuring the metrics of staffing, measuring the metrics, the benefits, the value we're delivering to our clients, and holding our team accountable for delivering that value. And lastly, looking at operational efficiencies and how do we provide staffing services more effectively? How do we recruit faster? A couple weeks ago, I did a webinar with Scott Wintrip, and he talked about the velocity of hiring and what you can do to become a zero time to fill organization. Well, Scott's book is now out, so I'll pitch it again. But it's a great way to learn about how do we get more efficient at serving our clients, because if we can do that, we're going to have a competitive advantage over any other staffing company in our market. And lastly, sorry for the unusual way this showed up, is leading your people. Leadership and internal staff satisfaction are closely linked. People don't quit companies, they quit managers. So are you committed to being a great place to work? And that's again about that strategic alignment, top down. Are you demonstrating integrity? The same thing you tell your people to do, the core value that says we're an honest organization that lives with integrity. Are you living it in every decision you make every day? And are you making sure there's a clear vision and direction that's communicated throughout the organization? Don't fall victim to believing that everything somebody wants is about compensation. Compensation is one key to high performance, but there was a study that SAA did and it was way down in the list. It's only a tiny piece of what is driving people's job satisfaction. In fact, it was 35th out of 40 different factors they looked at. And that was Barry's Dare to Lead presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to talk to us about Doris Kearns Goodwin's presentation.
Great, thank you, David. It was really exciting. I was really looking forward to this one with Doris Kearns Goodwin. If you've ever watched Meet the Press or Charlie Rose over the last 3 decades or so, you've probably heard her insights. And her keynote Wednesday morning, it leveraged her extensive research of incredible presidencies. Focuses on Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, and FDR. So 3 big ones. And she distilled the top 10 leadership traits that they all shared that she believed were fundamental to their greatness. So the one that Doris offered was the most crucial for their success, according to her, and that was resilience. They were all united by a fierce determination to succeed beyond expectations. People know that Abe Lincoln is known for his early failures, but she was sharing that he was so low at one point, his friends were moving sharp objects from his home, fearing that he was suicidal. At 25, Teddy Roosevelt's wife died in childbirth in the same home that his mother contracted typhoid fever at the age of 49. Teddy went off and started wrangling horses for 16 hours a day in the Badlands right after that, and then came back to be a tremendous president. FDR went through his quote-unquote trial by fire in his 30s when he contracted polio, and he emerged a deeper person out of that, empathizing with the poor and underprivileged. They all conquered themselves, the first prerequisite to becoming a leader, according to Doris, and how you handle losses really defines who you are. Next, the second one, they all surrounded themselves with those who could challenge them. Lincoln picked 3 men that all thought that they should be president, all rivals, and assigned them to his cabinet. FDR considered his wife Eleanor a welcome thorn in his side, and he demanded that his people speak their minds. Marshall famously would push back on FDR several times in history. Once he rejected a proposal to shift responsibility for extending the draft from the Congress to the president because he feared that those soldiers would feel victimized by a legal maneuver. So he felt free to push back and help make legislation and decisions better for FDR. Third, they also each created a culture that inspired top performance by their teams. Harry Truman once said, and it's been quoted many times in different ways, you can accomplish anything in life, so long as you don't care who gets the credit. And I saw that shared quite often on Twitter and social after this session, so that really stuck with people. Lincoln understood this instinctively, but even more striking was Lincoln's ability not only to share credit for success, but to shoulder responsibility for failure, which leads us to trait number 4, take responsibility for failure. Lincoln's first Secretary of War, Cameron, was about to be censured by Congress for bad contracts that resulted in guns that didn't work, blind horses, and knapsacks that fell apart in the rain. Not so good. His career was certainly about to end. His family was going to be stigmatized forever, and Lincoln stood up for him. Lincoln wrote a letter to Congress and said that if anyone was to blame, it was he and his entire cabinet. And then he went on to describe the chaos of the early days of the Civil War. And Lincoln's ability to acknowledge error takes us into trait number 5, which is continued growth made possible from learning from mistakes. So when Lincoln had to change his mind on something, it wasn't the tortured process that we see most politicians, if not all, struggle with today. Instead of pretending he was still aligned with a prior statement, Lincoln could simply say, yes, I've changed my mind, and I believe that I'm smarter today than I was yesterday. FDR may have been seen as anti-business with the New Deal, but then when war was afoot, he quickly changed that relationship. He actually put the CEOs of Chrysler and Sears in leadership roles, and he guaranteed profits to move production from cars to tanks and airplanes. Number 6 on the next slide, staying in control of their emotions. Lincoln would famously write letters expressing his frustration and then allow himself to cool down and revisit the letter to see if it needed to be sent. In her research, Doris uncovered many a letter stating never sent, never signed at the bottom. And this wasn't planned. David Kearns here shared an example with our team this morning. We're doing a consultation training, and he's talking about his kid's volleyball coach and that advice. He tells the parents that, hey, you can give any negative feedback that you feel you have to, but I just ask that you wait 24 hours before sharing it. And I really love that advice, because if it's still important, it probably needs addressing a day later. But if you wait for the reactionary anger to dissipate, you can probably be much more productive with your feedback and take the emotion out of it. Number 7, the 7th is the unique way in which these leaders, each of them stayed connected to their constituents. So ivory towers most certainly exist in companies, the larger, perhaps taller the tower, and there may be no greater bubble to live in than Washington, D.C. and the White House. Lincoln would visit the soldiers on the ground and in the field frequently, and it gave him great insights on popular opinion. And this was critical not just for having a general understanding of the populace, but to be a master of timing for legislation. Doris told us that had the Emancipation Proclamation had been 6 months earlier, Lincoln would have lost the border states. And if he would have waited any later, the good feelings that resulted from its passing would not have had the impact they did on January 1st, 1863. The next one is, all these presidents could speak to their countrymen with emotional power. FDR was famous for his fireside chats. Teddy Roosevelt, of course, coined the term bully pulpit, the title of Doris Goodwin's book here, and his statements like speak softly and carry a big stick resonated throughout the populace and throughout history. Number 9 is leaders, they know how to take time to think and replenish their energy and relax. It may not have ended so well for Lincoln, but he frequented the theater over 100 times during the Civil War. FDR had nightly cocktail hours at the White House during World War II, where all the guests could speak of anything other than the war. And lastly, all of these presidents exemplified leadership with the moral legacies that they left. Abe had the most remarkable legacy for obvious reasons. He saved the Union, he ended slavery, but his greatness was in his moral fiber and his integrity. He was resolute in the belief in the promise that ordinary people can govern themselves. And he believed that the South seceding would break that promise. So it was that moral conviction that led him every step of the way. So great, powerful reminders here of the fundamentals that make a leader great from Doris Kearns Goodwin in this keynote. And I'll pass it back to David here.
All right, thanks, Ryan. And let me go on to our third keynote. This is Mark Thompson. He's the author of the book you see on screen, Admired. And it was ways you can increase your value, but this particular presentation was about most admired leadership and the fact that nobody runs their company in a vacuum. Nobody does it alone. And what Mark talked about was an acronym, FUELS. He said, what fuels world-class leaders? It's 4 things. So number 1 is focus, is having, and I loved his first point under focus, is having productive paranoia, never being complacent. Because I remember a friend who's a CEO said, a business is never stable. It's always either growing or declining. And with the focus here is you want to be always paranoid, looking at what could go wrong, what could change, and how do I focus on the value I'm delivering? How do I better focus on my clients and what they need, or my candidates and what they need? As soon as I sit still, as soon as I rest on my laurels, I'm opening the door to the competition. Companies that get comfortable tend to fail. One question he recommended that all CEOs or senior leaders ask themselves is, if you had to start over, what would you do differently? Would you use the same structure, the same process? Would you have the same teams? Would you focus on the same clients? And if the answer is I would do these things differently, then why don't you start doing them differently now? And then you want to look at what matters most. Matters most to your clients, matters most to the industry you serve. Understanding the real value you're providing when you deliver temporary staffing or you fill a direct hire order. What is that value to the client? Did it save them time? Did it improve their business? Did that allow them to close a sale or meet a delivery? Did it save them the cost of being late on something? Did it give them a competitive advantage? Understand the value you deliver and then focus your resources on how you can create more of that value with the people in your organization. The U in focus stands for urgency and change. So first thing about urgency is to act. Sort of a Walt Disney phrase, the thing that impedes growth most is people failing to take action. When you have a great idea, act on it. Now, in Mark's case, ACT was an acronym that stands for Adapt, Connect, and Transform. So when I see something, how do I ensure our business is able to adapt? How do I connect with our team members, our employees, and our clients? How do I transform how we do things? Because change management is really hard. People, once there's momentum going in a certain direction, it's incredibly difficult to get people to go into a new direction. So how do we create that sense of urgency and distill it through the organization? We have to have urgency to act for clients. How do we lighten the load for them, make it easier for them to do business with us, make it easier for them to accomplish their goals? How do we act as I love this analogy, a superhero for our customers? So picture Superman flying in, saving the day. Well, put that same S on your chest and imagine what you're doing when you fly into your client's organization. If you're just filling a job order, there's no S on your chest. So how do we be a superhero? What greater value we can deliver to help them accomplish heroic things in their organizations? The E stands for engagement. And the engagement is both, again, from a client perspective and from a talent perspective. Are we providing the best experience for our clients? Look at the process that you make people go through to buy from you, to work with you, to be a customer. Is it easy? Is it fun? Is it intellectually rewarding? Is it efficient? How do we make the process better? How easily can our clients integrate our services into their businesses? So if you're providing on-site programs, how easily do your on-site managers integrate into your clients' organizations? How quickly do you get up to speed? How easily do the temps you supply integrate into your clients' organizations? Do they have a proper orientation and training? Do they show up ready to work? For both employees and clients, if you want to be an admired organization, find something to admire in others. If you want to create engagement with people who work for you, with clients who work for you, find something to admire in them, because when you admire them, they're likely to admire you back. And the L in FUEL stands for building long-term partnerships. Think of every one of your clients, every candidate as a long-term partner. If you knew that you were going to service somebody for 10, 20 years, how would you treat the initial sales experience differently? How would you treat the client's complaint differently? How would you treat that first service experience where you're setting the tone differently? What would you do differently to retain those clients? You really want to think long-term and say, what is the lifetime value of this relationship, and what can I do to add as much value as possible to that relationship? The other thing is related to long-term partners is make sure you're really differentiating every client and not falling victim to thinking that, well, all of my mid-sized manufacturing clients are alike. They have the same wants and needs as everybody else. The more you lump your clients together, the less likely it is that they will think of you as a partner in their organization. And lastly, Mark finished it up by talking about 3 traits, characteristics of the most admired leaders. He said they have purpose. They create a cause for the entire organization to rally around. This is part of creating a vision, but it's deeper than vision. It's a purpose that motivates, and there's been so much written about and talk about working with millennial employees and how they are really motivated to be part of organizations that do bigger things. So what is the cause your organization is built around? I was talking with a company recently, and I asked them about their founding story, and basically the cause was, well, we think we could make a lot of money in this niche market. That's not a great motivating cause. It might have been profitable for a while, but it's going to be hard to attract great people and retain great people without giving them that sense of purpose. Then you also have to have passion. Passion in how you operate, and help create passion for others, motivation. So understand the motives that drive your people. Understand what they get excited about. Why do they come to work every day? What is it that they're hoping to accomplish for others? And for your salespeople, it may be different than it is for your recruiters, and it may be different than it is for your support staff or your branch managers. But understanding the motivations of those people and their passions enables you to create a culture where people can be doing the things that are most motivating to them, which in turn will help them deliver the greatest value to your clients, which leads us to the third P of performance, and that's really understanding the deliverables. How do your candidates define success? How will you measure it internally? So clearly they're going to define success by, did you fill this job order? How fast did you fill it? How well did you fill it? If I'm a candidate, how quickly did you get me a job? If I'm measuring the performance of my internal staff, it may be by volume of certain activities, but also we have to make sure that's tied to quality. I see a lot of staffing organization where it's all about quotas. How many calls? How many send-outs? But there's not a measurement of the quality, and if you don't have the quality, your performance in the eyes of your client is going to be very low. So you have to have that combination of speed, quality, high-touch service all rolled in together into your deliverables that you're managing. And the most admired leaders are the ones who can pull these 3 things together, creating the sense of purpose for the organization, helping people find, realize, and live their passion day in and day out, and doing that towards a specific performance objectives. I think we have one more keynote to cover, and this final one was Harry Kraemer, who is a professor at Northwestern University and the former CEO of Baxter Pharmaceutical. And he taught a workshop called From Values to Action, and it's title of his book, but it's about principle-based leadership, continuing our Dare to Lead theme, and what great leaders need to do. So first off, let's talk about the characteristics of strong leaders. First point I loved is that strong leaders keep things simple. The world today is really complicated. It's hard for everybody just to get through their daily workload. Every company is trying to do more and spend less. They're trying to improve productivity and efficiency. When you introduce complexity into a stressed environment, that causes the environment to break down. So as a leader, how do you make things seem simple? How do you remove steps in the process that aren't necessary? How do you make the tasks as clearly defined as possible? How do you make sure every individual understands what you're asking of them? The more you can make things simple, the more effective you will be as a leader. The next trait is being able to see the forest and not be stuck in the trees. And when we're deep in the woods and we're surrounded fighting problems every single day, all we see is the trees coming at us. It's hard to step back, get above the trees, and see the entire forest, but that's the leader's role. It's to keep that perspective, to make sure you're going in the right direction, that when you're fighting the daily battles, they're towards the correct end goal, that you're reminding your team that, hey, we're on the same team as our clients and our candidates. We're not fighting with them. We're trying to deliver the value they want in the best way possible. We want nothing more than great candidates delivered efficiently, where we can deliver them for the lowest cost possible to our clients and still make a fair return on our time. We want to keep that perspective as to where the business is going next. Are we going into new niche markets? Are we going to get aggressive about sales? Are we doing more marketing? Are we going to have a recruiting push? Why are we doing that? So the leader sees the forest and communicates that, keeps it simple for everybody to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And the last point's another one I loved. Great leaders have this really innate ability to use common sense. I don't think you're seeing a lot of it right now in the nightly news in government. I'm not making a political commentary, but you're seeing a lot of crazy things going on because people can't make common sense out of very simple facts. In business, sometimes we're doing it because we want to look smart. Sometimes we do it because of a sense of power or authority, but we tend to overcomplicate. We tend to make things harder than they need to be. We tend not to necessarily look for the easiest solution, and sometimes the easiest solution is the best solution. Sometimes it's not, and we use common sense to figure out what to recommend, when to recommend it, and how to coach people. And finally, for Harry, we have principles that you can focus on. So first thing, if you want to be an incredible leader, you have to focus on self-reflection. So most of us have 2 to 3 times more to do than we'll ever get done, which is why we need things simplified. We need people to help us keep focus. But what we have to do when we have so much to get done is find ways to turn off the noise and evaluate some very basic questions. What are my values? What do I stand for? What is my purpose? What kind of example do I set? You need time without distraction to reflect on these issues. You can't do it while your email is flowing by or your office door is open. Get out of the office. Get some time away from all distraction where you can just think about, what do I really need to focus on? How do I separate what's really important from all the things that pop up that are urgent? What Harry recommended is this is something you do not once a year, not once a month, but every single day. Set aside 15 minutes for self-reflection. That self-reflection minimizes surprises. When something comes up that seems urgent, you can put it into perspective. When things are going well, that self-reflection allows you time to think about where you should show appreciation and allows you to plan for what you'll do when things aren't going so well. That planning process also helps you reduce worry, fear, and stress. So you can stay, and this is the second one, you can stay more balanced. A valued leader takes time to understand all sides of the story. They're balanced in their lives, they're balanced in their approach to business. They don't try to be understood until they've taken the time to understand the perspective of their client, their candidate, their employee. They also don't try to come up with the answers for people. They try to encourage people to find answers, to present answers, and a great leader knows a good answer when they hear it, but they force their people to come up with the answers. They also recognize that great leadership does not mean democracy, and balance doesn't mean that everybody gets an equal vote. They understand that the buck stops on their desk, and it's their job to make the hard decisions. It's just not their job to come up with all the alternative. The challenge for all of us is developing an ability to constantly understand everybody else's perspective and not be biased. We were literally this morning spending time brainstorming new ways to improve and enhance our approach to website development. And I'll tell you personally, it's hard for me to let go of the perspective that I have and to see things from the perspective of the other 12 people who were in the room, all of whom had excellent ideas to share. And it's only by stepping back and saying, I see what you're saying and why you're saying it, that I can improve my own ideas and we can ultimately come up with the best solutions. All of us as leaders need to do that. The third principle is to have true self-confidence. And self-confidence doesn't mean that you're arrogant, egotistical, or complacent. It means You know what you know, and you know what you don't know. You're honest about, you've done that self-reflection, you're honest about your abilities. You're constantly striving to get better. You're confident enough to say to the world, you know what, I don't have an answer to that, but I'll find out. You're also confident enough to say, I was wrong. I thought I knew what to recommend, but I made a mistake, and I was wrong. These are the people who have true self-confidence because they don't have to position themselves as being perfect. People, your employees, your clients, they don't relate to individuals who never make mistakes. They relate to people who are real human beings. And that genuine humility that you learn over time, that genuine ability to not know everything, to admit to mistakes, to tell people when you're taking a risk, that's actually what draws people to you and makes people want to follow you and makes you more effective as a leader. But the humility itself must be genuine. It's not something you can fake. And with that said, those were the 4 keynotes. All really excellent advice on leadership. More tips than I knew what to do with, but lots of advice to keep pondering in the weeks and months ahead. And now we're going to move on and go to the breakout session. So I'm going to talk about some of the ones that I saw, and then we're going to ask Brad and Ryan to talk about the ones that they saw. So right after the first keynote, there was an executive leadership panel, a panel discussion with the CEO of On Assignment, Allegis Global Solutions, Manpower Group, and AMN Healthcare. And they shared their lessons on leadership. And I love some of the take-homes here. Number one, kind of reinforces the keynote. CEOs need to provide a great sense of purpose. People want to know the value your company is delivering. Being a great staffing company is not enough for a sense of purpose. But if you think about all the people you're placing, the families you're helping to feed, the businesses you're helping to be more successful, it's easy to come up with that sense of purpose and to help convey that to the people in your organization. You want to show people that the company, but more importantly, the individual working for you makes an impact. How are they impacting that purpose you deliver? How are they adding value for your clients and your candidates? How does every single person from the vice president of sales down to the janitor, how are they making an impact on making other people's lives better? The more people see that purpose, the more engaged they're going to be in their work. And I love this comment that one of the executives made, that the only thing new in the world is the history you don't know. So if you're looking for how things are going to change, whether it's outside your organization or inside your organization, be a student of the past. Learn from when the country, the world, other companies, our industry has gone through similar times, and what happened then? Now, the reaction may not be identical this next time, but we can learn what's likely to happen. We've had the longest period of consecutive months of growth. There's going to be a recession. Okay, we may not know when, but we know it's going to happen. How do we prepare? We know periods of uncertainty drive staffing. Okay, we're not certain how every client is going to react, but we know how we can help. So as leaders, be students of the past to provide better consulting about the future. They also talked about technology's impact on staffing, and I loved some of their points here. It wasn't really a technology talk, but really it was about process, and it was about taking on some of SAA's beliefs, which is sort of interesting. First thing was, technology in staffing is about delivering better value. So how can we use the web? How can we use our ATSs? How can we use big data? How can we use mobile and apps to deliver more and better value to clients and candidates? It's an issue that the technology service providers need to address, but every staffing company needs to address as to how they can use the technology they have more effectively for their clients. A big issue in the workforce is getting people to be confident with tech. If they're not confident in tech, there's really not much of a future. And whether it's from people doing light industrial to placing executives, the best job prospects are for people who know how to use technology. And in staffing, we have to find those people, and we may have to get into the world of training those people so that we can help people up their skills to stay relevant as AI and automation displace jobs. And they also all said automation is a real concern. The jobs are changing. Many functions that they've been staffing are going away. As an industry, though, we need to embrace the opportunities automation will create. Think about how many people in the world are working in jobs that didn't even exist 5 years ago. So 5 years from now, automation may displace a lot of warehouse workers, but what will replace it? I don't have the answers to that, but I would be talking to my manufacturing clients to find out if I was in light industrial staffing. Technology must become increasingly sophisticated to create value and reduce pressure on margin. This was specifically talking about VMS technology, but in general, all technology in staffing is going through its third and fourth iteration. ATSs are getting more sophisticated. Job boards are all reinventing themselves. So every staffing company has to say, how do we get more sophisticated about using technology to communicate with our clients, with our candidates, with our internal staff, to improve our speed, to improve our recruiting capability, to improve how accurately we fill orders. We need to find new ways to use technology and ways to use what we have more effectively. Otherwise, somebody else is going to commoditize what we're doing today, and we're going to see the pressure on our profitability. And one point about technology where I said they disagreed with SIA, SIA was talking a lot about the growth in the gig economy and how the online staffing world was challenging traditional staffing, and these guys basically said, yeah, we're not buying it. Most of the growth in the gig economy is two companies, Uber and Lyft, and nobody else is seeing the same kinds of growth that those two organizations are. They said, we're not going to take our eyes off of the gig economy because we do believe there is a role for online staffing, and most of them also were developing some sort of online staffing practice to complement their traditional staffing practice, but it wasn't the same threat as others would have you believe. And finally, just some miscellaneous views and opinions. The unemployment rate is meaningless. I love this one because everyone loves to look at unemployment and analyze the impact on the workforce, but every CEO to a T said unemployment matters in terms of what it means to your client and in your industry segment. Next kind of semi-humorous point is that the biggest source of government revenue is fixing worker misclassification. As staffing companies, you're in between the government and employers in terms of managing worker classification, whether it's people who are being misclassified for workers' comp, or more specifically, I think they're talking about the massive number of people working as independent contractors who weren't really independent contractors, being a huge opportunity for the staffing industry to make those people W-2 employees through staffing firms. 98% of the gig economy is people working in second and third jobs. It is not yet displacing traditional work, which is why they weren't threatened by it. The online staffings, as I mentioned, they don't replace staffing, but they do have a place. They're a strategic complement. All of these organizations, their CEOs, provide MSP services, and they all felt that as an MSP provider, their role is to be a talent advisor, providing metric-driven advice. It's about being a marketing consultant, a workforce consultant, not just a staffing organization, not just a managed services provider. But I think this advice fit every staffing company. We all have to, big or little, be talent advisors. We all have to provide data-driven advice to help our clients make better hires and do a better job retaining people and use people more efficiently. And then they were asked to give their best advice for a $25 million staffing firm, since these are all billion-dollar companies. Their advice was specialize, then partner with bigger firms. Figure out how you can deliver value better than a global company or an MSP, and because of your closeness to the customer, because of your expertise in certain niche markets, you can do things they can't. Their advice to you, take advantage of that. The next presentation that I went to was Kevin Sheridan, who titles himself Chief Engagement Officer, but he talked about best practices in virtual management or managing remote workers, and 40% of the worldwide workforce today is remote. What's the biggest management mistake people make when it comes to remote workers? They don't hire people who would be good remote workers. So for your clients, if they're building remote workforces, you want to get really good at helping them hire people who will be successful remote workers. It's a different skill set than someone who works in an office. One surprising benefit of remote workers is on average they put in 4 more hours per week than people who come to a traditional office every day. Whether it's through nights and weekends, being online more often, or just being more focused, they're physically working more hours than their counterparts. As a manager, the key to remote talent is for you to trust people to do the right things, not to try to micromanage them because you'll fail. But you do need to verify. You do need to have metrics and measurements in place that you check up on from time to time to make sure the work is not just getting done, but getting done following the appropriate processes and procedures, getting done the way you want it to be completed. And then wrapping up his presentation, what drives engagement for remote workers? Recognition, just like for internal workers, but make sure you don't forget to recognize people out of the office, giving them opportunities for career development. And you're noticing this is sort of the same list as you have for an internal worker. The supervisor's ability to manage a distributed workforce, to communicate through multiple channels, and to be in touch with people they're not seeing every day. The organization, strategy, and mission, that same sense of purpose that every keynote speaker mentioned. Giving them great job content, so when they're off on their own working, they're doing the things they do best. And the senior management's relationship with the team, and that every single driver of engagement on this list is not unique to remote work. It's a best practice for managing anybody. So making sure that managers are doing their jobs efficiently and effectively and building strong relationships. They're providing the vision. They're getting people to focus on the right things, the Jim Collins, being in the right seat on the bus, and then giving them opportunities for career development and recognizing them for the good work that they do. So how do you do all this stuff? First point I loved a lot, regular performance discussions. Get rid of annual reviews. If you've got remote workers or internal workers, you need to be talking about performance issues regularly, at least once a month, and in some cases every single week. Talk to your remote workers about engagement. Are they staying engaged in the job? Are they enjoying the work? Are they finding it motivating? Are they challenged by not being around their coworkers? Focus on shared experiences. If you're having an office pizza party, one of the things Kevin said is have a pizza delivered to these people at their home. For the $20 that it costs you, it goes much further than that in making people feel like part of the team. Personalized recognition for each individual based on what's important to them. However, one thing he said about remote workers is the onboarding phase, that can't be done remotely. You have to bring people into your offices. That's done in person. Also encourage a lot of peer recognition. One of the things that I love that we do at Haley Marketing Group is we use a tool called Slack for internal communication, and we have a channel just for congrats. So whenever anybody gets words of praise from a client or even a colleague, it can be shared in our congrats channel so everybody, no matter where they're working, is able to share in that recognition. And then try to bring more fun into the workplace for the people who are working remotely. If you're having a dress-up day, let them dress up, send pictures in, or post them to your Facebook page. It may sound silly, but it makes those people feel included. All right, and then the last presentation I was at was on job boards and social media, and there was a panel, but one particular person stood out, Jeff Dickey Chasins, who is known as the job board doctor, and he provided some great insights on what's going on in the world of job boards. First thing, that they're evolving. They're growing 2 times as fast as the staffing industry because they're doing new things. The standard job board, Career Builder, Monster, became the job aggregator, Indeed. Now they're getting into the world of job distribution, and now we're seeing, as recently as a few weeks ago, social media sites becoming a job board with Facebook launching their jobs. We're also seeing more online classified sites like Craigslist and very niche job boards serving new markets. This one sort of blew me away. The largest job boards by revenue, Recruit is $2.3 billion in job board revenue. LinkedIn, $1.9 billion. Seek out of Australia, $711 million. Tegna, which is Career Builder, $695 million. Monster, $667 million. Craigslist, $301 million. These are big businesses that are suppliers to our industry, so we have to watch as they're evolving because it's going to impact how we interact with them. They're still the best source for active job seekers and high-volume recruiting. According to Jeff, nobody's driving more job traffic than the job boards and the aggregators. They're still doing it the best. However, he did say that a lot of niche sites tend to get more and higher qualified response because they're not just about jobs, they're about content. So particularly in technology fields, there are sites that would not classify themselves as job boards. They're more educational sites, but they have a job board component. They tend to be better for those very hard to find skill sets. Also, the pricing models. There's so many things. It used to be you just paid to post a job. Now we've got pay to post, pay per click, pay per application, resume database access, subscription models, that pay per view, pay per interview, and free job boards. So keep an eye on the job board you're using and their pricing models, and also talk to your sales reps about what different options they offer because they may have programs that are more cost preferential to the way you recruit. And I apologize, we have a duplicated. Another 2 points around this one is that the analytics are becoming increasingly important. Not just to you, the job boards recognize that, but looking at your costs, because there's so many different places to invest in recruiting. Now you really need to be taking a hard look at what's generating the best ROI, investing more heavily in the things that are working and cutting the expenses in things that are not. And the last point that Jeff made that I liked very much is that job boards are used by candidates to find your jobs, but they're going to want to apply at your website, so you have to make that apply process easy, fast, efficient, and mobile optimized, because the candidate behavior is changing as more and more people are using their phones to do their job search. And lastly, to wrap up Jeff's presentation, social media, it was question marks. They spent about 2 minutes talking about it. I'm not going to read all the points here, but essentially, social media still has not been that great a source for posting jobs. I think Facebook's certainly changing that. We're seeing lots of clients testing Facebook jobs, getting a good response, boosting content on Facebook and getting a very good response, using page reach to access talent pools they can't get. But the key to making it work is creativity, and that be ready. If you're going to do stuff on social, your candidates expect an immediate response. All right, and then we're going to turn this over. Brad, I think this is you.
Terrific. Thanks, David. This was a really interesting panel, and they took 3 different companies that are disruptors in the staffing industry, and several of these companies don't really consider themselves staffing companies, and that's what's so disruptive about it. The first company, Reviture, they're positioned really as a technology solutions company, so a tech firm. And what they do is help companies with tech projects, but they approach sourcing differently. They really don't source talent. They create talent. They've built an extensive university network, and they'll go out and select the top 1% in universities. They're getting top-tier talent before they even hit the job market. They're training them for 3 months, and then they're deploying them. They've developed cutting-edge training programs. For example, they have a 12-week coding boot camp. They teach people how to code in new and emerging languages that are highly sought after. So again, they're not dealing with a candidate shortage. They're not out there actively sourcing candidates. They're creating their own talent pool. And it's a talent pool of the industry's top professionals, that top 1%. Similarly, the next company, TopTal, they've looked at this and they've said, you know what, the freelance market isn't competitive to us. Online staffing isn't competitive to us. We're going to change the model. We're going to take advantage of that. More people are leaning towards the freelance work-life and work-life balance. They've said that what they're going to do in their position is to hire the top freelancers, help the top freelancers in the world. They don't care about where they're located at. The top freelancers in the world, we're going to help organize them. They focus on developers, designers, finance professionals, and they're very, very selective. Again, it's the top 2% of people in these areas that are freelancers. They do tests. They have a 2-week vetting process. And once you pass that vetting process, then you're deployed in some truly amazing roles with amazing companies. But you don't automatically get access to this network, and it's not continued. You have to stay up to date, because in each of these areas you need to be current with skills. So they have ongoing tests, caseworks, assessments. You need to work at your craft to stay a member of this network. So really, really interesting model. And then the last one that I wanted to highlight is a company that's based in Brazil, and where the other 2 companies are focusing on that higher end job. Emprego Legado is focusing on unskilled workers, and really they're focusing on emerging markets. In Brazil alone, they said that there's 46 million unskilled placements in Brazil a year. Huge opportunity. So what they've done is really focused recruitment efforts around a very tightly knit geographic region. So they coined themselves as geo-recruitment for employers. And the one thing that I really loved about this company is they've created this app, and they've made the candidate intake process and the candidate process for finding a job so simple. They have an app, and they say right on their website, download our app and you'll always have a job offer in your pocket wherever you are. Very, very geo-specific, and just a great model for quick deployment of talent, but then also a quick way for candidates to find jobs. The next panel discussion that I had the pleasure of going to was all about a growth strategy based on acquisition. And they brought in 4 leaders in the acquisition area for staffing firms. Al DeBellis, Jeffrey Duclos from Wells Fargo, Dave Phillips from Childs Advisory, and Vincent Rossi, CEO of Cortec, who's gone through many acquisitions. And they shared successes, horror stories, what to look out for, and I'll quickly go through all of these. Acquisition really can help fuel growth when organic growth slows. As David mentioned earlier, we're in a good economic state right now, but there's going to be the recession. Organic growth is going to slow. There might be opportunity for acquisition. They went through and talked about why companies look to acquire. Oftentimes it's to grow service offerings, or when one of your clients pulls you into a new geographic market, it may make sense to acquire another company so that you can not only service your client but expand your reach in that market. And then they looked at when is it time to acquire? When does it make sense for a staffing firm to acquire? And Vincent Rossi said this perfectly. When you own a market and you can't grow anymore, it's maybe time to look at acquisition. And in terms of finance, Al DeBellis suggested that you don't even consider really acquisition until you hit that 10 million mark in annual revenue. And then when doesn't it work well? When is acquisition not right? And the first and foremost, and all the panel members agreed, when you're small and try to acquire in a market you can't drive to. There's a whole host of management challenges that come along with acquisition. And when you're small and you don't have the resources, you don't have the management infrastructure, and you can't drive to the market, that is oftentimes is doomed for failure. When the other company has a bad reputation, oftentimes it's hard to overcome. And then also do your due diligence. Look at SUDA, outstanding debts, workers' comp costs. When these are out of line, that's generally a signal that maybe this isn't a healthy acquisition target. The next session that I wanted to highlight, this was something interesting that SIA did this year. They allowed vendors to have the opportunity to showcase their services. And this was an interesting presentation, and really it was around predictive analytics for job ads. And the core focus is spending your recruitment dollars more effectively and more efficiently. Recruitment advertising has really changed, and Shelley Mudd from Jobs to Careers really kind of walked through that change. And what we're seeing is that companies are beginning, and I just say beginning because a lot of people aren't doing it, but they're beginning to use predictive analysis, and it's really helping to drive overall recruitment costs down. Instead of just buying a job posting or a set of job postings where you're maybe paying for impressions, Jobs to Career is really about paying for performance or paying per application. So the ad spend is adjusted based on intelligent algorithms, machine learning. Your bids are automatically adjusted. And the way it really works is that you upload your jobs, you set a price per application that you're willing to pay, and they'll help you figure out what that price per application should be based on demand and competition. They programmatically push your jobs out to a huge network of job boards. So they have 2,500 partner sites that get 2.2 billion searches. So very big reach, and they push this out to all these large and niche job boards. And then you hire as many people as you want. Okay, you're paying per application. So as long as you're getting good quality applications, this is a really interesting and unique way to approach your recruitment advertising spend. Smarter, more strategic way. So if you haven't looked at programmatic ad buying or predictive analysis, it's something that you should consider, and it may help you drive down your recruitment spend. And then my last session that I'm going to highlight today, again, really interesting approach. They took success stories and turned these into showcases. And Leo Sheridan from the Advanced Group, somebody that I've had the pleasure of working with several years ago, he's taken his company, the Advanced Group, from 10 million in 2009 to 60 million in 2016 with a goal of 500 million by 2021. And he walked really through how he did that and maybe some challenges he faced and some pitfalls, and then also shared some success stories. So he had some just great takeaways here. Don't have time to go into everything, but one thing that he did was open up niche brands with a specific focus. So instead of diluting his core brand and being everything to everyone, he opened up several niche other agencies that had a core focus, one being a creative focus, one being an engineering focus. Great way to really solidify his place in the market, but not dilute his core brand. He has a group in his organization that is solely focused on disruption. So they're looking for disruptive technology. They're looking for disruptive business models. They're looking at what they can do next. They're a little bit paranoid, as David mentioned earlier, and they're looking for what's next on the horizon. And then probably my favorite part of this session, Leo shared Leo's learnings. And these are just some anecdotal things that he learned throughout the years and wanted to share this wisdom. So I'll go through a few of these that are listed here and then a few others that I didn't have room on the slide. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Surround yourself with successful people. Hire A players and don't be afraid to pay them. Okay, because their worth is so much, they're worth so much more than their salary. So truly look for those great people. Join business networking groups. Develop a board of directors. And there were several extremely successful staffing agency owners who attributed a lot of their success back to their board of directors, pushing them and guiding them in the right way. Join owners groups. Work with consultants that can help to accelerate your development. So really know what you know and know what you don't know, and then bring in consultants to help. Invest in tech and marketing. He attributed a lot of success to these areas and investing in those tech and marketing fields to really drive business growth. And a few other ones. Make sure your leadership team is in sync. Okay? Your leadership team doesn't always have to agree, but once a decision is made, they all need to be on board and move forward with that decision. Do employee engagement surveys. Hire people who have been there before and been successful, and as we mentioned earlier, pay for them. A leader's sole goal is to make people around them successful. Think big and be the best. Be a student of your space and always be paranoid. Take risks, but don't bet the farm. And then on a personal level, stay healthy. A healthy body is a healthy mind, and work 24/7. And with that said, Ryan, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great, thanks, Brad. Great stuff. We're a little bit past our 3 o'clock hour, so I'll get through this one pretty quickly. But this one's diving into the reality versus the hype of a robotic workforce. And Art Pappas, founder of Bullhorn, he moderated a panel. The goal was to really discuss the real-world application of robots and intelligent agents in the workforce. The panelists were Amy Glasser from Adecco, Eel Graevsky from First Job and Maya, and Alan Stokowski from Randstad. And Amy, she started by giving a walkthrough of how Randstad was using AI on the recruiting side. The bots are now talking to the talent. So they're using AI for screening and also onboarding. They've got a digital assistant that texts the talent after they use the job board, and they ask questions like, tell me about your job search. And that same bot can contextualize the responses and return answers like how many hours are required or what the pay rate is. Amy said that dialect was an issue at first. The bot actually struggled the most with the stronger Southern dialects, but it's learned a lot along the way. It's really adapted to that, and of course that's a key feature of AI technology, is that it can learn. Eyal, the CEO and founder of job search company First Job, he introduced their recruitment automation bot, Maya, and this is pretty mind-blowing stuff. Maya is an application assistant that uses artificial intelligence and natural language processing to ask a few questions, like Amy's, that they verify qualifications, they answer questions from, Maya answers job questions from applicants like company culture questions, policy, benefits. And he said that Maya automates as much as 75% of the recruiting process. So you can imagine that's a huge gain both to the job seekers, and we're constantly hearing those job seekers complain to our clients about the delays in recruiters getting back to them, if they get back to them at all, and to the staffing firms themselves for both time to fill and their overall fill rates. Initial tests found that applicants who engaged with Maya were over 3 times more likely to hear back from a recruiter or a hiring manager than without Maya. And, bots can be confused for a human. One of the most shocking anecdotes that EL offered was that one candidate actually propositioned Maya for its phone number. So the audience got a good laugh out of that one. That's how real this experience is. And, the big players in AI, IBM, Google, Microsoft, Intel, you could probably put NVIDIA up there. But EL explained how they got started. They bought $10,000 worth of data allocation with Microsoft's AI. They call that Lewis, and they built on top of that. And now Maya ended up going beyond Lewis, and they ended up building their own platform entirely. But the point was that the cost of entry is low to investigate how AI automation can improve processes. And Amy and EL, they spoke a bit more about how they're amassing data to achieve their fundamental goal, placing the right person in the right job at the right time. They'll eventually be able to track the success of those placements to the initial interactions, and then they're going to have metrics that should improve that screening process going forward. So what's ahead? For one thing, Google, they're planning a jobs API using all their intel that's built out the ontology or the semantic terms for all the resumes and the skills in there. And that's really a Herculean task, but we've seen Google accomplish those before. And the same way that they often serve up results that bypass actual websites with their search engine today, you may have seen that where you type in a question and you're getting the answer from the site without being driven to the site that's got the answer for you. It's kind of hard for me to imagine if a future where the public job boards aren't circumvented in some way. But it looks like the play for now is for Google to license the back-end technology to folks like CareerBuilder and Dice and select job boards to give them a serious competitive advantage. And with that, I think, Brad, you're going to start us off with the lessons we learned from Exec Forum.
Thanks, Ryan. And kind of building off what you just discussed, my first lesson learned is don't run from disruptors, embrace them. And this was actually a lesson that we shared at last year's Executive Forum too. Don't think that a robotic workforce or advancements or bots aren't going to impact your industry. They are. And if you run from them and hide, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So instead of that, embrace them. The companies that are really growing the quickest are the ones that are disrupting the industry or even positioning themselves outside of the staffing industry. They're wildly successful. So invest in technology, take some risks, do things differently, create a category, look for ways that you can advance by using some disruptive technology or process. My next takeaway, and it's something that's been echoed a few times here in the presentation, is be paranoid. We're in a good economic state right now. This is the best time to be paranoid. Look at what's out on the horizon. Look at who's going to steal your lunch. Look at your competitors, even the bad ones, and find one thing that they are doing better than you. Okay? Then reinvent your process and be better at them than that. That's how you're going to create a sustainable advantage. And stop wasting recruiting money. Over and over at Staffing World, at Staffing Executive Forum, at a marketing roundtable that we went to, when we ask about predictive ad buying, no one's doing it. Okay, this is a great way to drive down your recruitment ad spend. Use that technology, use those smart algorithms to help you spend your recruitment dollars much more effectively. Great way to drive down recruitment cost and fill your candidate pool quicker.
Thanks, Brad. And as I just mentioned, artificial intelligence, it's already entered recruiting. It's not just a pie-in-the-sky idea. This doesn't mean the recruiters are going to be losing their jobs. Ideally, it will make them much more effective as they focus more on deep value add and less on administration. And that was something that came up in that session was, the folks that really loved getting all the tasks right and doing the admin stuff, they're probably not going to do so well in the future, whereas those that are really excited about being able to spend more time on their true value add are going to be the successful recruiters for the rest of the century. Next one here is global marketing spend has hit $1 trillion. The CEO of On Assignment, Peter Damaris, he posed the question in one of the sessions, will my CMO control more of the IT budget than my chief information officer in 10 years? My chief marketing officer using up more of the technology budget than the information officer. So think about that. With the results of marketing spend much more predictable and quantifiable, digital marketing is growing exponentially across all verticals. And the last one for me is the lessons from Doris, Kearns, Goodwin. She gave a well-timed history lesson to remind us of what is fundamental to greatness and leadership. She even mentioned Buffalo legend here, Tim Russert. She kind of pined for the days where when he was around, there was more attention given to these leadership traits, and she kind of wished that would have been more of a focus when we had 20 or so folks competing and more conversation around leadership.
Thanks, Ryan, and I'll kind of bring it home with the last few points that I took home. So one of my lessons, we've believed in the gig economy for a while, but it was nice to see that it's not as scary to the staffing industry, as some have said. There's such a huge opportunity to play nice with the gig economy, to figure out how it integrates with the staffing organization of today rather than replace it. We don't necessarily need to be competitors, but if you put those two solutions together, you now can offer far greater value to our clients and differentiate yourself from organizations that don't figure out how to play in the gig economy. My second lesson learned is uncertainty is good for staffing, but it requires leadership to manage. And the uncertainty drives the demand for the staffing industry, as I talked about in the beginning of today's webinar, but it really requires that leadership. That's what SA this year, the Executive Forum, was all about. We need to figure out how to help our team members address their fears. We need to figure out how to help our clients address their fears. We need to figure out how to turn fear into action. We need to train our salespeople and recruiters how to be more consultative, how to give really good advice to clients and candidates of how to manage their workflow and their jobs in these uncertain times. And it's about education. It can be education during sales calls. It can be education you do through your own webinars. It can be education when you're doing local public speaking, or when you're writing blog posts, or you're writing for your local chamber of commerce. We have to teach people more ways about how to use staffing as a tool to deal with uncertainty. My third lesson sort of reiterates what Brad was just talking about. We've got to get better with technology and analytics, proving our value, improving the service experience, enhancing our recruiting, finding new ways that we can deliver value to clients and candidates, and ensuring that people understand the value we're delivering, using the data, the analytics, to demonstrate the quantifiable results of staffing services. All right, and I've got one last point, which was kind of funny. So the bar captain is mean. At this year's Executive Forum, the theme of the conference was Dare to Lead. So we decided to take it a step further, and in our pre-show marketing, we talked about how to become a world dominator. So we wrote Haley Marketing's Secret Guide to World Domination. If anybody would like a copy, there's actually some really good management advice in there. We'll be happy to get you a link to where you can download it. Just put it in as a question, and we'll send it to you after the webinar. But the payoff to reading our stuff was to come have a drink with us at the show. So you can see our lots of mini bottles of booze that we had put out on a table. And no sooner had I finished arranging than that the bar captain walked over and said, "What the hell is that?" And then I said, "It's our giveaway." And he said, "Oh, you can't do that. It's illegal. Take it down right now." And he stood there and stared at me until I took them down. But I will say a bunch of people saw that happening and came right over to talk to us. So it still worked as a marketing tool. Had a lot of fun with our theme, but sort of the last idea for all of you, the real theme to this one, is thinking about conferences you attend, thinking about what their theme is, thinking about how to tie it into your own marketing. So when you're going to go to an event, you really make the most of the event. You maximize people coming to your booth. You drive people to your website. And yeah, you have a drink with them and have some fun, because if that doesn't all tie together, then you're not going to have that successful of a conference. And speaking of which, at the conference, we were talking about a promotion that Haley Marketing had, and I put the URL for it on this slide, haleymarketing.com/DD2017 details. We had a promotion on digital dominance, since we've had so many requests for improving social marketing, improving online reputation, improving email communication with clients and candidates, that we put together this package. That our secret guide to world domination was not just about that package, but we offered that as well. So I want to offer it to all of you on today's call. Check out the DD2017 details webpage, and you can learn more about what we're offering, because that's still good for another week till the promotion ends. And I think, guys, that brings us to the end. We have not had any questions come in. We will stay on the line if anybody wants to, although we're going to conclude the webinar itself because we've gone late. But I will say before we wrap things up for today, we have a product demo coming up on April the 18th. We're going to be demoing our Haley Mail content marketing service. And then on the 20th, we're going to be doing a webinar, Lunch with Haley, talking about how to get more ROI, more response, use the technology built into your staffing website even more effectively. So from Brad and Ryan and I, thank you all very much for being part of today's Lunch with Haley. Hope the extended Executive Forum recap was worth your time, and we look forward to seeing you next month on our future Lunch with Haley events.